I grew up playing tennis in the 1970s, which was a great time for the sport of tennis. It was then that tennis really became more of a mainstream sport than a sport for the privileged, especially here in the United States. With the likes of Jimmy Connors, Bjorn Borg, John McEnroe, Chris Evert, and others, there were plenty of personalities to fuel the rivalries that took place on and off the court. Since that time, many great players have come and gone. Because it is difficult to compare players of different eras in any sport due to technology changes and higher fitness standards. Selecting the greatest player ever can be a difficult and very subjective task. One thing I think most fans can agree on is that we are currently witnessing three of the greatest ever in Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. Despite the challenge, here is my list of the 10 greatest male tennis players of the Open era 1968 to present. I have actually included 11 players here with two greats tied for the 10th position. 10. Ken Rosewall. With a long career that included both the pre- and post-Open era, Ken Rosewall certainly deserves a place among the all-time greats of tennis. His 8 Grand Slam titles combined with 15 major championships undoubtedly qualifies Rosewall a place in tennis immortality. With a career that started in the early 1950s and ended with his retirement in 1980, the quick and agile Aussie was renowned for his backhand and crisp and accurate volleying. His last Grand Slam title came at the 1972 Australian Open at the age of 37, still a record for the oldest Grand Slam winner. I watched Ken Rosewall play during the latter part of his career and at the time probably did not realize the greatness I was watching. To compete at his age with the next generation of tennis greats speaks volumes to his conditioning and mental toughness. I am placing him in the 10th position along with Andre Agassi, as I feel that both players are worthy of a top 10. 10. Andre Agassi. Who can forget the young, brash, long-haired Andre Agassi? When he first arrived on the tennis scene in the late 1980s, I have to admit that at first I was put off by his seemingly rock star and looks and attitude. But something happened along the way, and by the time he finished his 20-year career, I was not only a fan but I had also come to respect him as a great player and spokesman for the game. With those killer ground strokes and returns of serve, no top 10 list would be complete without Andre Agassi. Off the court, Agassi has proven to be a champion as well. There may be no athlete out there who does more for their community than Agassi and his wife, tennis legend Steffi Graf. 9. John McEnroe. John McEnroe. What do we do about Johnny Mac? Well, for starters, we include him on our list of all-time greats. When it came to hard courts, fast surfaces, and creative shot-making, there may have been no one better. His fiery attitude and occasional bad boy behavior made tennis fans either hate him or love him. Underneath was a highly competitive athlete who hated to lose and sometimes let his emotions get the best of him. Who can forget his epic battles with rival Jimmy Connors and his 5-set loss to Bjorn Borg in the 1980 Wimbledon final, one of the greatest matches in Wimbledon history? 8. Jimmy Connors. No one dominated tennis more during the mid-1970s than Jimmy Connors. In 1974 alone, Connors had a staggering 99-4 record and won the 3 Grand Slam tournaments that he entered. Connors was banned from playing in the French Open in 1974 due to his association with World Team Tennis, and this prevented him from a possible Grand Slam sweep. Despite peaking in the 1970s, Connors had a long and impressive tennis career, retiring in 1996. Connors still holds the record for ATP Tour titles with 109. 7. Ivan Lendl. The quiet and stoic Czech with the big serve was the most dominant player of the 1980s. Lendl wore down his opponents with his powerful ground strokes, topspin forehand, and incredible level of conditioning. He was the world's top-ranked player for 4 years, and held the number 1 ranking in the world for 270 weeks, a record in that day. In contrast to many of his more outspoken peers, Lendl was known for letting his game do his talking. 6. Bjorn Borg. What was not to love about the long-haired, blonde Swede with the killer ground game? With ice water in his veins, the quiet Borg dominated tennis in the late 1970s and had some memorable matches with the likes of John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors. Borg dominated Wimbledon, winning the title 5 consecutive years from 1976 to 1980. Despite his relatively brief career, he retired in 1983 at the age of 26. Borg won 11 Grand Slam titles, all at Wimbledon and the French Open. Borg was the first player of the modern era to win more than 10 majors. In my book, Bjorn Borg could have been a top 5 all-time had he continued to play and not retired while seemingly in the prime of his career. 5. Pete Sampras. Pete's place in tennis history is difficult to judge as he only won 3 of the 4 Grand Slam events over the course of his career. Clearly more comfortable on hard courts and grass. How do we decide one's place when they dominate on one surface and struggle on another? When Pete retired in 2002, he was considered to be the best player of all time, although some would dispute this. He was number 1 in the world rankings for 6 consecutive years, and his 14 Grand Slam titles was a record at the time. Who can forget his epic battles with Andre Agassi that made the 1990s a great decade for tennis? Pete went out on top when he won the 2002 US Open, his last Grand Slam tournament. But without a French Open title, or even a final, how do we decide where he belongs in the list of best ever? For now, I think he comes in at the number 5 spot. 4. Rod Laver. It's difficult to assess how Rod Laver would have fared against the players of today, but I suspect the red-headed Aussie would have done just fine. It's hard to argue with the Rockets' record. He was ranked number 1 in the world for 7 straight years, 1964 to 1970, and has more career titles, 200, than anyone in the history of the game. He is the only player to have twice won the Grand Slam, doing it once as an amateur in 1962 and again as a pro in 1969. If Laver was not excluded from the Grand Slam tournaments during a 5-year period in the mid-1960s, who knows how many he would have won. During this time period, the pre-Open era, the Grand Slam tournaments were for amateurs only. The Open era in tennis did not begin until 1968, when professionals were finally allowed to compete in the Grand Slam events. Given that Laver was ranked number 1 in the world during this 5-year period, it's likely he would have won many more Grand Slam titles. 3. Rafael Nadal. Were it not for the recurring tendinitis in his knees and wrist injuries, Rafael Nadal may well have a few more Grand Slam titles to his already impressive resume. At 35 years of age, the fiery Spaniard, known as Rafa and the King of Clay, has 20 Grand Slam titles and certainly has the potential to pass Roger Federer and Novak Djokovic. Rafael is regarded as the greatest clay court player of all time. Although fans of Bjorn Borg may dispute this claim, his record 13th French Open title in 2020 in dominating fashion certainly makes it difficult to imagine anyone being better on clay. While it is difficult to draw comparisons of players from different generations. I think Nadal has proven that he deserves to be considered among the best to ever grace the courts. His 2020 French Open title gives Rafa 20 Grand Slams championships and ties him with Roger Federer and now Novak Djokovic for most Grand Slams of all time. This will only heighten the debate as to who is the true GOAT. 2. Roger Federer. For many years it was easy to select Roger Federer as the greatest of all time. His 20 Grand Slam titles and 310 weeks ranked number 1 speak for themselves, and even at the age of 39, he is still winning and competing at the highest levels. From 2004 to 2008, Federer went 237 consecutive weeks being ranked number 1 in the world, a record that may never be surpassed. Even though younger players are now finding a way to beat him, his consistently high level of play over his 20-year career is a testament to his conditioning and ability. Winning the 2018 Australian Open after his outstanding 2017 season that saw him win Wimbledon and the Australian Open prove without a doubt that Roger Federer was the greatest of all time as of 2018. But, with Nadal and Djokovic adding to their Grand Slam count since, it may be impossible to declare a GOAT until all three have finished their careers. His dramatic 5-set loss to Novak Djokovic at the 2019 Wimbledon Championship proves that he can still compete with anyone. Roger certainly had his chances to secure Grand Slam number 21, a loss that will haunt him with limited opportunities remaining, but he is setting a new level for excellence at an age when most players have long since retired. Injuries sidelined Roger for 2020 and the early 2021 season. Fans will be anxiously watching his return, especially at Wimbledon, his favorite surface. For now, Roger dips to number 2 all time, but never count him out. 1. Novak Djokovic. At 34 years of age and in the late prime years of his career, Djokovic is clearly the best player in the world at the moment and has the potential to win many more Grand Slam titles. With 20 Grand Slam titles already under his belt and now tied with Nadal and Federer, he certainly has the potential to surpass them. And with a record 329 weeks and counting ranked number 1, it's hard not to give Djokovic serious consideration as the greatest of all time. With his 2016 French Open title, Djokovic became the 8th man to secure a career Grand Slam. His dominating start to the 2021 season with wins at the Australian Open, French Open, and Wimbledon makes it clear that Djokovic is the best player in the world at the moment. Beating Rafael Nadal in the semifinals of the 2021 French Open makes a clear statement that he can beat Rafa on his best surface. Djokovic dominated the 2021 Wimbledon Championship, losing just 2 sets on his way to beating Italy's Matteo Berrettini in 4 sets, with his record of winning multiple major titles on all surfaces, and his advantage in head-to-head matches against both Federer and Nadal. Novak Djokovic has earned the title of greatest of all time. The only question remaining is if Djokovic can achieve the coveted Grand Slam by adding the 2021 US Open title.